Jen? Oop, yes?
Yeah.
Yep.
Working. Got it.
Okay. All right. Good evening. At this point, I would like to call the meeting of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee to order on Thursday, November 3rd, 2022 at 7 o'clock. And I'd like to begin by inviting you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Force be with you.
Okay. I'm going to start this evening with the land acknowledgement. Julia?
The Hamilton Wenham Regional School District would like to acknowledge the Massachusetts Tribe, the tribe of indigenous peoples from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We would like to pay our respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts Tribe and their descendants who still inhabit historical Massachusetts Tribe territories to this day.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, we're going to have citizens' comments. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on HWCam. Doesn't appear that there's anyone that would like to make a citizen's comment in the room, I'm guessing. Okay. Do we have anyone on Zoom who would like to offer a citizen's comment?
Good evening. Anybody on Zoom who would like to comment, please use the raise your hand feature.
Okay. At this point, I'll have Mr. Tracy close down the Zoom and let those people know they can continue to watch on HWCam.
We're shutting down the Zoom link. You can continue to watch the meeting on HWCam's YouTube site.
Okay. Next up is the review of our school committee protocols. I'll ask Amy.
As elected members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. Number 6, school committee members will attend meetings on time and be well prepared to discuss agenda items. While at meetings, members will stay focused on the agenda items and will not engage in communication outside of the agenda being discussed. When making decisions, school committee members will keep an open mind, utilizing the best information available, including research, best practices, public input, and financial considerations. Members will debate issues and not each other. Members will analyze carefully and debate fully whenever necessary prior to making decisions.
Thank you. And thank you for being willing to jump into a long one. I appreciate it. Next up, as the committee had directed us to spend the next few meetings reviewing the mission statement, I'm going to ask Jen to read the portion that we're on today.
The Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee will lead and inspire a district that empowers administrators to seek innovation, responsiveness, and creativity in all aspects of district operations.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have the consent agenda. Or does anyone have any items on the consent agenda that they would like to hold? Okay. Amy?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the consent agenda as listed on the warrant, on tonight's agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Jen Carr. Is there, oh no, there's no discussion. All those in favor? All right, and that is unanimous of the 5 members present. And the motion passes. All right, I didn't hold it, but I did want to just shout out to Mihaela that I appreciated her call out to the mission statement in the minutes. I don't know if you noticed that in all its glory. I know she's listening, so. Okay. Wow, we are flying along. Okay, so next up under new business is, so if you notice on the exhibit, thank you for putting it right up there, the protocols that we have been reviewing all along are from last year. We signed them as a committee last fall, around this time, last fall. And so the question this evening is to put to the committee whether we want to recommit ourselves to these protocols and to have this committee sign them. So, you know, this is just updated with the 2022-2023 school protocols. So if you are willing, Amy, maybe we could have a motion before we get started.
I move the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee adopt the 2022-2023 School Committee Superintendent Protocols as linked in the agenda.
Second.
Second by Jen Carr. Okay, are there any, before discussion, are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions?
I have a
Julie.
question. About number 5, I was under the impression we were not supposed to email all school committee members.
So that's an excellent question. I'm glad so it's not, wouldn't be you emailing all school
I'd be
committee members. This would
forwarding
just
a
be forwarding.
communication.
So, and I do think that the word relevant to overall district policy, those words are doing a lot of work there, right? This does not mean that every single email that you receive needs to get forwarded to the entire school committee.
Okay.
And you,
So it's
you
at
know-
our discretion if we just email it to the principal or Eric or,
yeah,
I
and
would prefer to just email it
Just
to
to
me
you,
and then let
okay.
me sort it from there, so you're not saying, who should I send this to?
correct.
okay.
But there certainly would be emails that it would be important if only one school committee member received an email that really was, and I actually think that Eric's point of clarification is a good one, that you might want to consult with the superintendent about how do we want to get this information out to the entire committee? Or do we need to, or has it already been resolved, right? Like,
Okay.
does that answer your question, or do other people have other thoughts on that question?
I have a related topic, I guess. I don't know if this is the place to talk about it or if it's something we might want to add. I wonder if a review of our process as far as answering people, maybe I need to know a better process as far as answering people in the community that ask questions. Since we don't want to reply to all, it's hard to know whose questions have been answered and whose haven't. So I've asked Eric before, like, have you answered this person? And you will say yes or no. Is that the best way to handle all that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to
So
clarify.
So and again, I think that's, that certainly could be part of the protocols. It also could be something that we might want to think about at that's a great question to
A
talk about
workshop.
with Dorothy at
Yeah.
a workshop, because it's an open meeting law question, and it's
Right.
a procedures question, and I don't know. I don't have more of an answer than that, but
no,
I do
think it's good to just maybe add it to the next
right, and I
opportunity we
do
have.
think this, I will just chime in and say, I think this committee it does a very good job of being very mindful of not having those kinds of discussions over email. I think the committee is very mindful, and it's difficult to know when are the few times when I might be allowed to do that, or when could it be, when would it be helpful to just let people know I've already answered this. And I noticed that and I don't want to go on too long, but I noticed there are times that I don't do it when I could. In other words, if the person is just asking factual information, when is the next meeting or something like that, it might sometimes be helpful to CC the whole, if I were going to answer it, to CC it, just so that and you know that, like, this has already been answered, this person doesn't
Yes.
need.
Yeah.
And it's something I think maybe I might be overly cautious about.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way.
I also use Eric's flow sheet, where like which questions go to which people.
Yeah,
And like, if it's a principal question, I'll say, well, if you look at this flow sheet, the best person to ask it for that at the high school is Principal Brian Menegoni. His email is ba 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 ba.
Right.
okay.
And I think that's fantastic. And I wonder if part of what Amy's wondering is like, I wonder if somebody already said that to this
Yes,
person.
That's what I'm kind of getting at.
You know, like, I wonder if somebody already said the best person to talk to is the principal.
Or also, is no one answering because we assumed somebody did,
Right.
you know? I
Right.
just don't want to let anything slip.
Yeah, please.
If you see me on an email, I will try to respond for the group, so nobody has to figure out like
Okay.
what to say. So I will generally try to respond, and if I feel like I'm stuck, I reach out to Dana usually, and we craft something together, so.
Great.
Generally, if you see me on there, you can bet that I'll try to respond. I try to get to them a little more quickly when I see that, so people aren't stuck trying to figure out whether they should answer or not.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions about the protocols? Okay, is there discussion? All right. Maybe we're ready for a vote. What my hope would be is if this were to pass, we have them here so that we would just sign them and then update with a new document with this current committee's signatures. Okay. We're ready to vote?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor? All right, and that is unanimous of the 5 members present, and the motion passes. Okay. All right, next up, we have a payment request from athletics. Eric, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is a payment that, in talking to everybody thought was made. It didn't get made. We received a request from Harmeling, who they do our physical therapy stuff and help us with PT people, saying, hey, you guys didn't pay it. So we went back and looked, and sure enough, we didn't pay it. So the procedure for it, because it's an FY22 item, we need to bring it to the committee just to approve the payment. We can pay it, it's just a matter of having the committee approve it, so.
Yeah, and just to clarify that this, and Vinnie let me know if I'm saying this correctly, it does happen sometimes. This is a little bit different, but it does occasionally happen just in the normal, this is not, but in the normal course of events, it does occasionally happen that a bill needs to be paid in a prior year bill needs to be paid, and we would always vote on that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Amy, can we have a motion?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the payment of the FY22 payment request for athletic department.
Second.
Second by Julia Campbell. Is there further discussion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor? All right, and that is unanimous of the 5 members who are present, and the motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, this is the vote on the superintendent contract. You all received the contract. This is just for full transparency's sake for all the public who is listening. The reason that it is not linked is because this is much the way that we do executive session minutes. If someone does have a question or a concern, we would still need to go into executive session to have that discussion because it would still be under strategy and negotiations. I will say that being said, that I take full responsibility that there are some strikeouts that are still in the contract. Those strikeouts are correct. They're correctly stricken. The contract would be fine with them still there. My intent was to remove them to provide you with a clean copy, but they didn't all get taken out, and that was my fault. Okay, so I think we need a motion. You didn't make a motion yet, did you?
I did not make a
Okay.
motion on this.
Would you be willing to do that?
Are we approving or accepting?
we are, I think we are accepting,
Yeah.
I think, yes.
Accepted. Okay. I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the superintendent's contract as linked or as shared with the school committee earlier yesterday.
Second.
Second by David Frankel. All right, is there any discussion? Does anyone wish to discuss? Okay. All right, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? All right, and that is unanimous of the 5 members present. Yay.
Awesome, thank you.
Congratulations, Eric.
Exciting.
It is exciting, yes. Thank you all. and
Means you
thank
have to work
Eric.
with us, though.
No, I think it's important that, I think we've all had the same goal to stabilize things and get things moving forward, and this is just another step in that. I think people will calm down, you know, I get assaulted everywhere I go, what's happening? So, you know, I appreciate the committee's, you know, negotiation and openness and conversation, and then look forward to continuing to build what we're building, so it's exciting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Good things ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is the Equity Audit Final Report.
I'm just going to do an overview of this. We've seen the larger version of this. We've gone back and forth 5 times with EJP, Equity Journey Partners, to make it functionally readable and accessible by others. So they've been able to take out some of the jargon out of the way and some of the charts and graphs out of the way and move them into an appendix, and then really focus on what are the primary points in this report. So our DEIB committee worked with Regis, who we all met, and back and forth, lots and lots of time to come to this. And realistically, this started a year ago, as you know. It started last school year. There were a number of meetings and surveys and opportunities to connect and learn, and they dug through all kinds of data that we had available, from things like our handbooks to discipline statistics, or attendance statistics, and started to just look at all the bits and pieces. They talked to students and parents and community members, some of us, and really built this report to outline our kind of equity status, if you will, in the district, and it gives us some great information. There are several themes that get outlined in this report: sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, students who identify from historically marginalized groups, middle school, 11th grade, gender, systems and processes. So these are the things that kind of rose to the top when you started looking at the data, and that they were focused upon. Each of the themes really worked to help us to hone in on our goals, because we'd received this during the summer. So as you know, we built our last year's goals not really knowing anything, and this year's goals by connecting the dots. So that this gave us the ability to do that, and specifically the strategies. There were 6 equity strategies outlined in this report, and that's really some of the things that we're focused upon as they connect with our goals, our conversations, our meetings that we're having at school. So, for example, equity strategy 3: implement practices that support a sense of belonging for all students. That's a big deal this year for us, and it's really been my theme since day one, like equity in the center of our work and trying to help kids to belong. So today is a good example. Every single leadership team meeting we've had this year has one piece of the equity conversation with our school leaders and our district leaders. So today, the conversation was, we did biases last meeting, and that kind of led us into, okay, so now let's look at belonging in your building. How do you know, or what things can you identify that kids belong in your building? And we did it in two phases. We did kids and we did staff, because if you remember from the data, staff members also felt like they didn't belong. So those 2 prompts drove our leadership team meeting today, and that was the conversation about, okay, let's think about it. So 15-minute free write, name what's in your building, or in the case of like Tom Geary, he, what's it look like with your staff members? Technology, Alan, what's it look like? So we went through everybody that was in the room, kind of pulled out bits and pieces so that principals could share some of the things that they're doing. I think some people naturally have, if you go into some of our elementary schools, their mottos are all around belonging and responsibility and respect, and so there's more of a natural flow. But this gave the leadership team the opportunity to have a conversation. So I just want people to know that even though this is a year ago information, that we're really acting on it already. We've been acting on it through last year and into this year, and we'll continue to connect the dots. And so you'll see a lot of these strategies are already connected. The MTSS, the belonging piece, equity skills. Like as we get further into the year, what does that look like for kids? What are equity skills, and how do they link to social emotional learning, social emotional skills for kids? And again, a lot of that starts at the elementary level and grows up. So as we look at that, we're trying to figure out how that flows through the system and ultimately connects to the portrait of graduate work. So there's a lot of trying to connect the dots here through the information that we have. So we've integrated some of the strategies into the district level goals. We're going to continue to work with more equitable approaches in areas like budgeting, resourcing, and improving things like student attendance, looking at what are the barriers, what's in the way for some of our kids to get into school. And then we'll continue to stay focused, like threading the needle into future school years. I think, and I said this when we approved the goals early in the year, you'll see that DEIB goal or some form of it for the next probably 5 years, connecting our work and as we grow. And we're really good in some areas, and we know we have some holes in other areas, so we'll just continue to do that work. So I thought people may want to take a peek at it. I know we've had a discussion about the larger report earlier in the year at the workshop, and certainly I can answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I don't know if the rest of the committee had the same experience, but I started reading this whole thing and I kept thinking, I feel like I've read this before because we have read it before.
This
The
one's
abridged
much
version.
better, though.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's much
Light
more clear.
years
Yes,
more
definitely.
readable.
More readable, yes, exactly. Which is maybe why it felt like, I feel like I've read this before, but not exactly.
We
Okay.
kept saying to Regis, we wanted anybody in the community to read it and get it.
Yeah.
Not, if you handed that 120-page
Oh, forget it.
tome to people, they would be
Yeah.
done in page 3. So,
Yeah, no, it's very, very helpful to have it sort of,
Still would have liked more graphs and fewer tables. It's just really hard to visualize.
yeah.
From
I
a
really
table.
found, and it was, while I appreciated having the tables moved to the appendix, it did feel like, I kind of want to, like you're saying, visualize it, and it would have.
we'll see
Within
some of this come back around too. What we've asked the principals to do is they're doing their work to use this as baseline data. Okay, what types of things can you do? So as you know, we have Panorama. So we started using Panorama this year. Panorama has a built-in social emotional learning survey that we can do with our kids, and that links into each of their data sets, if you will. So it just gives us another point, and we can kind of go backwards and say, okay, here's where kids were a year ago, where are they now, to start to see how things are changing over time, or if they're changing. And if they're not, then that's a discussion point. Like, okay, what are we not doing well that we need to do better with?
I just have two
Yeah,
questions.
Julie.
Well, I'll start with one question. My first question, it says that the district's going to survey elementary students this year. Do we know what that's going to look like?
So realistically, we're looking at it from the perspective of our social emotional learning move. So with the counselors, you're not going to give a third grader or a second grader a
Right.
survey. So it's more of a
Exactly.
conversation in classroom. So you know how they do something like morning meeting, start to take advantage of those time periods. But what we're trying to do right now is settle on a social emotional curriculum that we can integrate K-5, pre-K to 5, and that will help drive that. So it's really just getting all the ducks in a row and then having those conversations, grade level, grade appropriate. It's really like, some kids will tell you, I love to come to school, and other kids, you know, we carried them in the morning. So it's going to depend on a whole bunch of things with the little ones, so.
I asked that question because something that concerned me in the audit was just the, and I didn't pull it up, but just I worry that there would be resistance from the community, or there'll be misinformation around what is happening with the survey of elementary school students around this. So I think we just need to do a really good job of telling people exactly why it's important and what it means and why we're surveying elementary school students. That jumped out at me immediately, and I said, oh, that's going to be a red flag for a lot of people, not for me, but for a lot of people. I think they're going to wonder what that means and what questions are their kids going to be asked and that kind of thing. So
And it's a trust factor thing. you know,
it's a
so
total
we're-
trust factor.
We're working on that piece of it, as we know,
Uh-huh.
you know, in many areas, and part of that is my job, to be able to put that out there. I mean, realistically, if we're gonna give a kid a survey, here you go, you wanna see it, you know, like, it's, you know, they're, as we go back a year, remember the conversations, like, oh, here we go, CRT and race and all that came into play. We've been able to show people that that's not realistic in what we're trying to do here, so.
Yep.
We can continue that with the conversations in the district, and certainly working with our own people. I mean, the greater teaching force, if you will, is really the parents' connection to what's going on in the classroom. So really having them understand fully what we're doing and why, and then they make that connection to parents. We're communicating differently this year, you know what I mean? So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, where people stop me all the time and say, I'm amazed at what I know about my kid's school that I didn't know last year because of X. So those types of things are important for us to continue to use as tools. I mean, it's just really what other ways can we communicate? And we're doing it, as you know, we're trying in multiple languages now. We're trying
I love that.
to shift into, so that's another piece of that whole conversation about belonging. Where if you're the only, if you're the only Portuguese student in the building and nobody speaks Portuguese, then what's your connection if your family only speaks Portuguese at home? So those types of things have moved to the front of our conversation. So we have a couple principals who really are leading the way with that, which is helpful because other people can take another piece of the pie and we can kind of trade it around. So.
Can we also, I know a couple of us asked for this, an appendix with all of the student and family comments? Because if anything, it seems like they cut more of them than was in the original
Yeah,
130 page.
we can just make it available. I would just take some of there's some things that we wouldn't want to put just people's names in there, you know.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I would
You'd
just,
redact
yeah, I
it.
would redact it a little bit, but yeah, we can get it for you.
Thank you.
It's fascinating reading.
Oh, I
It
loved
is. I
it.
mean, it really helped us to build the goals.
Yeah.
When you're starting to talk about equity, I mean, we go back to day one when I met with all the teachers. Everything I did was purposeful, based on that first document we got that was, 120 pages, because all these themes that popped out were like, these are the drivers for the school year. This is really laid out for us. So being able to help people understand that, and we'll continue to do the work through this year and next year, and it's hard work.
I
It's
think
uncomfortable.
my second question is, what are equity metrics? And they might have explained it, and I don't know. Like, how do we define equity metrics?
So we're looking for places where barriers are, and those are generally attached to something like attendance. So attendance could be used as an equity metric
Yeah.
for us. Suspension could be used as, so any data point that, the phrase we're using this year with the leadership team is equity pause. So here's an example. You're in a data team meeting. I was in one 2 weeks ago with kindergarten teachers and the principal and the coaches, and they're talking about all this data and this moving around, and then there's that piece missing, like, do we ever actually talk about how this data looks from the perspective of some of our marginalized groups? So some of the groups we identified in this SOA report come right to mind, so you have your economically disadvantaged kids, your Ls, and you can start to use those metrics as your equity metrics, like where did they stand versus, if you remember the MCAS, the big differences in the graph, so those gaps are equity metrics for us. So the idea is, okay, how now do you take what you know and get better at it?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I
Oh.
have another question.
Yeah, go, no,
I
Julie,
just
go
want to see
ahead.
if anyone else had
Yeah.
questions. So it seemed like reading this report that an HR director is dramatically needed in the district, or just from this perspective. And I know, we all know this, like what you put in your budget reflects your values. Like, I'm just really talking to us as a committee, and I don't know the answer to this, but how are we going to do this? Like, how can we do this where, I mean, that's one piece. I feel like there's so many pieces in this that we're tackling, like MTSS, and we're tackling a lot of the pieces, but that's one that I feel like the school committee itself could really get behind, because it's a budget piece.
An
But I
HR
don't know if
director?
it's, yes.
We have one.
Oh, okay.
Got one in July.
Got one in July. That was because of last year's budget.
Okay, so just considering, like, are there other budgetary considerations that we need to take into account to make some of these recommendations a reality?
I think it's going to come down to resourcing.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to come down to personnel. I think the people on the ground are doing the work. Go to one of the gentlemen that I work with in my NISIP group, my superintendent's group, is from Brookline. Huge district, lots of people. They have an equity director. I wouldn't go there. We're so small that we can manage those things within, based on the information that we know. So belonging is our big key. In Brookline, it might be very different. So I think that our approach is we have the people that we need, and it's really the resourcing. So what types of resources. So for instance, the conversation we've been having with the counselors and the elementary principals is we need that SEL curriculum to be able to get kids on the same page. And what you're seeing happening now is the next level of the new teacher, not new, but the teacher evaluation rubric. Not only are the SEL pieces built into that rubric, the next iteration will also have the cultural awareness piece. So understanding about the kids in front of you. So that'll now be part of the evaluative process. So those are the kind of tools that we'll be able to use and then build from there. I mean, we have to build appropriate training for our teachers. We did a lot last year just to get people through the conversation about bias, and we had a lot of uncomfortable conversations and several times throughout the year. And that's going to continue through this year as well, and just kind of growing. And then through the budget process, we'll look at resourcing with our principals. They're actually moving some of their monies around so that they might use money in a particular line item, and they're so that we met with some of them already, and they're like, okay, I want to move this here because I know I want to get this. Our literacy curriculum is a good equity resource. Everybody's doing the same thing. When I go to third grade in one building and third grade in the other building, I know exactly what's going on, and you know what I mean. And you're seeing this different level of excitement where kids are actually going home to mom and dad and saying, I talked about the nervous system today, rather than, what'd you do today? Nothing.
right.
So those pieces all fit into the equity conversation when you start to look at it. And then looking at everything we do, theater, the arts, athletics, all those are pieces of the conversation. So we have plenty of people in place. It's a matter of now helping to really organize that, because you can't do it all at once. So it's really like, that's why we're so focused on that belonging piece, because it came out so loudly in the equity audit.
All right. I'm so excited that this actually came to fruition, because as we know, it's been a long time coming. So just commend everyone that worked on it.
The DEIB committee did yeoman's work, meeting, weekends. I was getting emails during the weekend like, here's the next version, here's this.
Yep.
So they were definitely putting in the time. It was important. And, Stacy leads that group and has worked with a number of, of our counselors and our special ed people to keep that thing moving forward. So.
Okay. Thank you, though, for your hard work. And I really encourage, everyone, if anyone is watching or not, everyone to really take a look at it and read the statistics and look at a lot of the reasons. Like, I just think of a lot of the reasons why the committee has made certain decisions are reflected in report.
Mhm.
I thought it was really powerful. So I hope that, we can take as many recommendations into account, as many as can be resourced, like you said. So if there's something that needs to be resourced, just come, let us know.
You'll see the shift in the budget process towards,
Yeah.
towards more like aligning.
I'm just so
standardizing
pleased.
curriculum and things like that.
I know these are hard conversations for the community, but I'm really pleased that they're being had.
It's a hard conversation because everybody has a different perspective and understanding of what it is, and I think
Yeah.
we've been able to answer questions when they come up. Like I've answered the CRT question maybe 10 times, and it's
Because
fine. I'm glad
it's
people are
someone
asking.
who's-
Rather than sitting home brooding about it, come ask and come talk about it with us so that we can at least get the right information out there. And I think that's important as part of the process. I think everybody initially heard when we first started this process, think about it, equity audit. And immediately race came to mind. For a whole bunch of reasons, whatever they might have been. That's all people could focus on. So we've spent this last year shifting that spotlight to really let's look at it from our district and who we are, and then build from there. And I think
Yeah,
people
there's so many different ways to be marginalized other than
yeah.
race. But thank you so much, and thanks to the committee for their hard work.
Yes, they did a great job.
I'm going to just jump in. I was going to share a little bit about this in my chair's report, but it seems like it fits in here, so I'm just going to share that. I was just at the MASC conference, which was, the themes were centered around DEI and belonging, and one of the sessions that I attended was calling Creating and Promoting Equitable Conditions in Schools, which was presented by Beverly, who are our neighbors. And I know that you spend a lot of time talking with them.
Yep.
And, certainly much of what Eric shared was very similar, that they had to they're about 3 years ahead, they're about 3 years in. One of the things that I took away, they said several times, which was hard, I think, for the meeting, there was a large group of people attending the meeting, to hear, was that they really anticipate that that this isn't a 3 or a 5 year work. They estimated that it is, first of all, forever,
Right.
but that they really estimate that this is a 10-year cultural change, to really complete a cultural change. That was hard for the room to hear, and but it was interesting to listen to a group that felt like they were really on the right path. They're doing the work. It's hard, and still they're saying they anticipate that that big culture change is going to be 10 years.
Look at civil rights, look
Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
Exactly. But
Any
anyway,
big
I just wanted to share that because they are our neighbors. Obviously, there are different communities, but they are right close by. And what Eric just said about those initial steps when you're doing the audit, about talking about, okay, but what is they talked a lot about, what's our specific district? What is, in their case, what's unique to Beverly? So in our case, what's unique to Hamilton-Wenham? So anyway, I just wanted to chime in. I was gonna share that during my chair's report, but there you go.
Just so people know, through MASC, we get a lot of data. I mean, my whole NISA program, there's always something related to that conversation of equity, belonging, inclusion. But we also have meetings every other month with the North Shore superintendents, purposely to have these discussions, okay, what are you doing? So I know that they have a DEI director in Beverly, I can have that conversation. He usually does a presentation, like last meeting we had last Friday, a group from Cambridge presented what they're working on, and that's helpful to be able to draw from, to be able to say, oh, you know what, I can use that. The state also has a number of things like this Coherence guidebook that's on the screen right now, really helps us to talk about equity in the equity pause piece right now. So there's one of many throughout this booklet that's, how are we explicitly centering the voices of students, families, and diverse stakeholders in our planning processes? So we're using as many resources that are available, and that there are many, many resources right now available to us. So this is work we're doing with the leadership team, this Coherence guidebook, and we're building from that. So things are purposeful. And then I'm on the board of ECLC and NEC, which also gives us connections. So ECLC does some of our are more complex training, like seed training, where they're really digging deep. Like they're putting it, like they personalized this. The training I did with them last year was unbelievable, and it was just like all about opening myself up and seeing, really how I think about certain things and how so there's a lot of connections we're making outside of the community that are just advantageous to all of us, so.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right, and we don't need
No vote,
to do anything with that. I mean,
Nope.
we're doing a lot with it, but we don't need to.
Yeah.
This committee doesn't need to.
nothing tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, next up, updates from the MSBA, and back to you, Eric.
Thank you. This is exciting news, actually. I got a phone call last week. I was actually in a meeting in Beverly. I got a phone call from MSBA, Diane Sullivan, and she said, listen, we want to fast track you guys out of Module 1 and into feasibility. And this is why. I mean, as I've been saying all along, we hit every milestone on time. We're one of the few, I think, that hit the milestones, including securing the funding, which she explained to me a number of communities are having trouble doing, securing that initial funding. So for us, we have all the ducks in a row. What would usually happen is we would have to wait until March, when the board meets in March, for them to say, okay, we're going to invite in, out of the, I think there were 17 of us last year that they invited to the first stage. Then they go back and look and see kind of who's ready, and they invite in March. They're trying to put us on the December 1 board meeting so that we can move forward with the process, because we do have a good plan. They outlined in not only this letter, which is a little bit complex, but the second exhibit is a little more friendly. Whoa. And it really says to us, if you can, but what they do is they take all the information that they look through the process, like new housing starts, births over a certain number of years, changes in ins and out with the school system. They're looking at our enrollment projections. They're also doing their own enrollment projections based on it's really simple modeling of, if you have this many here, you'll probably have this many here. But they do that out, they project that out, and they start to come up with numbers that they can support. So this second document really outlines what they're willing to support for us. And what happens is we take these 4 options and bring them into the feasibility study phase, and these 4 options could generate others. So you could give this to your designer and say, here's our first step. What does this look like? And then they start to look at it from a design perspective and start to give you other options. So if you look at the first one, it's okay, just keep Cutler School as it is, build Cutler School, K to 5, and we'll allow you to build 285 seats for kids in there. So that's our first option. On the other end of the spectrum, which I think the one we've been leaning towards the whole time, is enrolling grades 1 through 5, and consolidate Cutler and Winthrop into one building in one location, and allowing us 740 seats. So right now we're running about 680 kids in those grades when you look at the 1 to 5 grades. So that gives us room for any growth. And what we're doing, we see now is the growth is coming at the elementary level. All the increases in enrollment right now are in the K to 5 range. So that's kind of how they build it. And then they ask us to say, here's what we'll support. If you agree with that, we'll now take you to the board and vote whether or not you get invited into feasibility. So she seemed pretty confident that as long as we were okay with the options, then we would get this back to them before November 16th.
Actually did have a question. How come the enrollment for grades K through 5, if you consolidate the schools, is a smaller number and the enrollment for grades 1 through 5 in a consolidated school?
It's, yeah, it's a great question. When I first got this, I asked it, and because they're thinking about keeping some of the kids at the Bucher. So in this left-hand model, if you will, they're saying some of these kids can go to Bucher, so some of those grades would still be running in the Bucher school. So you'd ultimately be running 2 elementary schools. Not a lot of them, because Bucher, as you know, doesn't have a whole bunch of rooms, but yeah, some of those grades it wouldn't be so in the scenario. I think the best scenario for us would be that kind of far right-hand side, and you can run K and pre-K in the Bucher school, and you can develop a pre-K program that could drive as a financial resource, where you could grow that program and make some money to offset some budgets, because now you have the room to do it, and the opportunity with that building. So
really, that should be consolidated Cutler, Winthrop, and Bucher.
yeah, it's a weird. They don't want to put Bucher in here, because they don't want anybody to assume that they're going to cover the cost. That's
Right.
how they explained
Right.
it to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Right.
I asked the same question. I was like, wait a minute.
No, and so did I. I think that right, yeah, I guess without using the word, it's all Hamilton Wenham. On the far right is all Hamilton Wenham grades 1 through 5, whereas
And
the
that's what
other
was
one is
throwing me off.
really consolidating Cutler and Winthrop,
Yeah,
you know.
okay.
So,
And they don't include pre-K in anything.
No, because they don't fund pre-K.
Correct.
Well, I mean, theoretically, we don't run neighborhood schools anyway, right? We
Right.
just run enrollments. I will say that I've, in my, 6 or 7 years teaching now, I've worked in, every district I've worked in has been in a new school, and Swampscott, Lynn, Beverly, and all of them have been undersized within the first 5 years.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're actually looking, that we get a number at 740 with a 680 enrollment, there shouldn't even be an option
Right.
B. The fact that they're actually going to roll that in and saying that they'd cover it, because I was already ready to come here and tell you guys, like, no, we're going to need a bit more from our town side. Because it's the way it happens. And even the way they're designing schools now, they're not sort of designed in the same way, like, little breakout space and stuff like that, where we know that those are really valuable things to have, to separate spaces, even at an elementary level, but that's a great number.
Yeah. And that's where the options come into play. They can take that and then look at your building and say, oh, we could do neighborhoods in your building, or we could do grade looping. So each of these options drives the building configurations as you go through the schematic design phase in feasibility. So realistically, they're just saying, okay, I mean, they're not going to fund anything they don't agree to. So here's what we'll agree to. They're saying to us, if you agree, and I think we're in good shape with this, and can jump on that train. And we're never locked in. We can back out at any point. It's just a matter of, I was excited because they're fast tracking us to say December 1 instead of March 15th.
No, there's a lot of good things happening for us here. We're getting, this number's good right now. The reimbursement number is really good.
Yep.
It was probably 4 or 5% higher than I was really thinking we were going to get. Like, we have a lot of good things going on. Like, this couldn't have happened in a better time. Even if we got chosen into the program 2 years ago, I don't think we would have made out as favorable. So right now, all the stars seem to be aligning for us. It's a really good thing. Really something to be
Oddly, we
excited about.
Go ahead, sorry.
No.
Oddly, we should hit a different economic time by the time we start this, which is super helpful. All of a sudden, your supplies and materials are available and cheaper than they are right now. So I think, as Dave said, you have kind of the stars starting to align. As you look 3 years out, we're going to be in a very different economic place at that point, which should overall save us quite a bit of money.
Yeah, hopefully the bond rate will be back down somewhat.
What's that?
I said hopefully the bond rate will be down a little bit by then too, because it's right up set. I did have a question. What's both sides of the argument for ending up with 2 elementary schools rather than 1? Just from a...
So when we had submitted the first statement of interest years back, it was just for Cutler. And And then along the way, people started to say, okay, let's think about the inclusion of Winthrop. They're in similar states. Once we finally got accepted by the MSBA, they would only look at those two schools. So when we had the walkthroughs with them, Tom Geary actually convinced them to quickly walk through the Buchers so they could, we were trying to entice them to say, we want to include the Bucher as well. Their concern was the regional agreement, because nobody knows where this new building could end up. But they were also looking at it from I think the financial perspective of
Right.
what makes sense for the MSBA.
So assuming that you could get the towns to agree to go down to 3, is there enough economic, what's the drawback of doing that from a learning scale point of view, whatever, versus, and what's the economic advantage of not having 3 overhead, or the 2 overhead structures versus 1?
What would happen, it financially, it will cost us the money. So when you say, okay, we want to include the Bucher in our model, everything would be out of our pocket. So now you're looking at 140 kindergarten kids moving to that building, and then another, I think I have 26 preschoolers right now that would go to that building as well. So now you have to build out that space at our cost. So when you're looking at 8 more classrooms in a building, it gets into the millions of additional dollars that don't get reimbursed. And what happens is, and I think people misunderstand this, it's not a one-for-one reimbursement. So you really have to be very careful about what you're choosing to do and not choosing to do. And I can use a previous project I was involved in, the Wilmington High School project, and they wanted an orchestra pit in the auditorium because theater was huge there. It's a huge, huge thing. And the MSBA says, you can build it, but you got to pay for it. So they ended up having to shell out, I think, over $250,000 to do this drop in the floor and all the work that was, and that's what ends up happening. So what do you want to pay for, I guess, is, you know, it becomes that the building committee starts to make those decisions along the way, and sometimes say, oh, it's cutting corners, and sometimes it's really like, can we afford to keep paying on our side rather than getting the reimbursement advantage? So it's kind of a balancing act.
Got it, thank you.
I think we're in a unique situation also where we're going to build an elementary school. I think when most people think of building projects, they think of middle school and high schools. And sort of a drawback people have when you're talking about an elementary school is a 740-person elementary school is actually a really big school, right? And there's something that, you know, I think we all sort of romanticize that small neighborhood elementary school. So, you know, if you're going to get any sort of pushback, I think that's where it is. In you know, there's pluses and minuses to everything, but like, you know, it's definitely understandable. I grew up in this school, literally, you know, and like, so if God forbid anything ever happened to the school, it would break my heart a little bit. You know, but like, I don't see that happening. But like, just you know, that's where you're getting into, like, you know, when you think of like a 740-person middle school, it doesn't even, you know, and it's a small high school, but you know, for an elementary school, you're like, wow, that's, you know, there's a lot of little kids there.
Right.
I mean, it would be awesome too.
Yeah.
I mean, the energy would be incredible, but.
Anna?
I think, I just want to speak to that point, though, that we need to be careful how much we talk about these numbers and get the committee, you know, the community to visualize and say this. And I think some of it's really a sense of what you're used to, you know? I mean, I grew up in an elementary school that had anywhere between 4 to 6 classrooms of every grade at 30 kids a class. I mean, and there were something like 20 elementary schools that size in the district. So I think it's all very relative. I also think, as Eric was saying, there are ways you can make a school within a school. You can have hallways, you can have wings, you can have teams. And I think that's a really effective way to break it down. So I want to be really cautious when we start to apply emotional judgments about numbers. The numbers are meant to be objective, and I think we should try to keep them objective and recognize, like, no matter, this is all going to be a change. It's going to be a huge change for the community. So I think I like the way they've broken it out with options and are being very factual about it. And I think it's all going to be different and it's all going to be awesome, but I think it's also, it really depends on what you're used to.
Anybody else? Eric, what do you need from the committee?
So we need a vote to approve for you and I to sign this, begin that next step of, we sign this, agree to it, send it to them. We got another document today that they're gonna need from us. We'll send those to them before November 16th, and they'll put this on their board meeting for, I think it's December 1st. It's early December. And then we'll know soon after that what the next steps will be. It's hopefully moving into feasibility, which is
It's exciting.
super helpful.
It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So my understanding then is that would be looking at the second exhibit there.
Yep, the one I have on the screen.
The one that you would be looking for authorization from this committee for the superintendent and the chair to sign and agree to this, correct?
Correct.
I don't think I said that very articulately, Amy, but
So I'm saying that we will authorize you and Eric to sign this document? Is that the motion?
sure, I think
You
so.
can just say
yeah.
to agree to the document.
Just agree to.
Yeah,
right,
agree to
we're-
the
That we agree to the document?
Yeah.
I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee agrees to the Hamilton-Wenham Cutler Study Enrollment Certification document as linked in the agenda.
Second by David Polito. Is there any further discussion? Okay, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? And that is unanimous, and the motion passes. Okay,
So exciting.
it's very exciting.
It's very exciting. That was a great phone call to get.
Okay. Looks like Vinny is up next.
Switch to his computer.
Oh, there's a picture. So nice.
Yeah, just hit the source. There you go. There they are.
Soon enough, it's going to be a picture of a baby.
I know, there'll be a third one in the picture.
Talking about the picture?
Is it the
I
budget
feel
on
like
the left
soon
or the
enough,
right?
the picture's going to change.
Just making sure it works. So tonight I'm here to present to you our FY23 year-end forecast as of Q1 ending September 30th, 2022. So for those of you who have seen many of my forecasts, you might know that the first quarter is kind of the most inaccurate one of the most 3 quarters. It's mainly because only 25% of the fiscal year has actually passed, and at the same time, only 12% of the school year has passed, with roughly 22 of the 180 school days left. So there's a lot of time to still go between now and the end of the year. So the forecast will change between now and then. So because there's so much time left, I do not, in my first quarter, complete an entire line-by-line analysis. So I do not go through every 500 of our individual accounts. Because there's so much time still to pass and it wouldn't be worthwhile. But what is included in this forecast is all major known expense changes through September 30th that we're aware of. So what are those big changes? So right now, I'm just gonna briefly highlight them and then go in a little more detail throughout the presentation. So just starting with the biggest one, and in no in particular order after that, we have our prepaid tuitions. So in FY22, as you remember when I did my Q3 forecast last year, you guys gave us approval to prepay approximately $1.2 million in tuitions with FY22 money for FY23 tuitions. On top of that, Student Services supplied me with their Q1 out-of-district year-end forecast, and they're showing a favorable budget of roughly $350,000. On top of that, the district is scheduled to receive an additional $272,000 in circuit breaker offsets. This goes directly against out-of-district tuitions as well. And like last year, this year, again, we're riddled with vacant positions everywhere that I'm going to dive into a little bit more in a moment. Again, health insurance, we're seeing a favorable budget here, and it relates mostly to our vacant positions that I'm also going to discuss. And then lastly, we have a favorable to budget transportation savings, and I say this favorable to budget because we saw a huge increase in our transportation costs. It was almost 13%, so it's really not favorable, but I was very conservative in how much I budgeted for the increase, so it is favorable to budget, but it's not really favorable with that huge increase.
It's not as bad as it could have been.
It was, yeah, correct.
Exactly.
So just to dive into out-of-district tuitions, I tried to kind of make this brief summary chart because we're dealing with huge numbers here. It's $4 million, so I'm trying to explain to you where this huge balance is. Of course, with any time here, stop me if you have questions. I don't mind answering them in the middle. But when you look at our out-of-district tuitions, the very first thing you do is you look at what is our budget. So in our approved out-of-district tuitions budget, was roughly $4.1 million. So from there, we plug in what Student Services is projecting the year-end actuals to be. They projected it to be roughly $3.7 million. So if you stop right there before we keep going, we have an approved budget of $4 million, and we're only realizing expenses of roughly $3.7. Right off the bat, that's where the roughly $350,000 comes from. But you can't stop there because you have the big payment of prepaid tuitions. So right off the bat, even though Student Services is projecting a total of $3.7 million, we used last year's money to pay $1.6 million of these tuitions. So you have to take that off the top. Then you come back to circuit breaker, which I mentioned on the previous slide. We're going to receive roughly $272,000 in offsets on top of our normal circuit breaker that we have to use this year, and we have to put it against prepaid tuitions. So the net expenses in the end is roughly $2.3 million. So you remove the 2.3 from the 4.1, you're left with a FY23 projected actual balance of roughly $1.7 million. But you can't exactly stop there. So if you remember this slide, I took this directly out of my May 5th presentation. Here I tried to explain the kind of phased-in approach of leveraging our prepaid tuitions to leverage that against the $770,000 of Chapter 70 money that were received in FY21 that we used against our FY23 budget. So again, that money was kind of meant to be one time, and if we did not prepay tuitions, that $773,000 would have to be completely made up by the towns in the FY24 budget. So the idea back in May was to use prepaid tuitions to every year for the next 3 years to phase off that $770K, so it wouldn't be such kind of a hill and valley in the budget cycles. But as you'll see throughout this presentation, I believe we're going to be able to match that 770 without involving prepaid tuitions. So tonight, I'm recommending that we delay this phased-in approach one more year, and leave the other excess funds to match the 770,000. Now, I don't need approval on this tonight. I don't need approval until the third quarter forecast, so we have plenty of time during the budget process and throughout the next couple months to discuss this. But just so you know, the forecast that we're about to look at includes that you go with my recommendation. So if we do that, you take the 1.7 from the previous two slides and use the excess funds to prepay 24 tuitions, again, in the same amount of just roughly the same amount of 1.1 million. My recommendation before was only 550. So just so you know, if we didn't do that, our excess balance would now be back up to 1.1 million, which would have to be returned to the towns through E&D. So what we were trying to do is lower that 770. If we don't follow my new recommendation, we're going the opposite way. We're now making that 770 almost 1.1 million, which further compounds those kind of hills and valleys every year. I'm going to stop if anyone has questions, but while I take a drink, but I'll keep going.
Can I just say something? Okay. It's important to note with the tuitions, they're super variable. What you have today could be very different than what you have in February. For example, we just had a very high-end out-of-district placement get closed by the state of New Hampshire, forcing us to find a new placement for a very tricky placement. So it's a very specific placement that's almost $250,000. So the reality is there is no place to put kids right now, and where we have some options, it's going to cost us more money. So we'll use some of that. We know for a fact that there's at least 1 or 2 kids going out in the next 40 days into new placements because they need specialized programming. So that number will change as we move forward. Just keep that in mind. So what you see now, you may not see when we get to the third quarter forecast.
Again, which is why the first quarter forecast isn't as accurate. But so just moving along to our salary surplus, I'm going to stop for a second and just say I know I'm using positive terms and surplus and balances, but when it comes to salaries, surpluses aren't really a good thing. These are kind of teachers that aren't here, services that aren't being delivered to students. I just really don't know, are there any words to choose here? I don't mean it in a positive thing. Again, it's services not being delivered. We're not a for-profit industry. Our goal is to kind of break even every year. My personal goal is about 1% left over, or 2 tops, but nonetheless, this is surplus money. It is money left over at the end of the year. So as it relates to salaries, it really derived from 4 major areas. We have our vacant positions, our salary scale advancements, otherwise known as our lane and column changes, our salary breakage, which for those who don't know, it's when a higher teacher on the salary scale either resigns, retires, or is terminated, and we replace them with a lower experienced, lower placement teacher on the salary scale. And then lastly, we have our increased offsets. So a few of these I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. I developed this small chart to kind of help explain what's happening here. When I made this presentation, I did have a third exhibit to include in the school committee meeting, which literally broke out every single 79 transactions that happened here. But as I was going over it with members of the business office, I could see they were a little bit confused and it was just too much information, so I decided to summarize it here. If somebody really is interested on all 79 of them, I already have it made, so I don't mind sending it to you. But nonetheless, I'm just going to briefly summarize them. We had 16 occurrences of salary scale advancements that did not occur. So this is a teacher or a TA who submitted to move along on the salary scale back in December of 2021. But when September 2022 came, they weren't eligible to move, meaning they didn't complete all of the required coursework and weren't eligible for the higher salary increase, but we budgeted for them. So thus, we have a savings of about $31,000 as it relates to the salary scale advancements. The next one I kind of consider my catch-all. It's those salary breakage as well as any change in positions. So if we traded in, any TAs for teachers, or if we moved staff around, or if we hired the lower scale teacher compared to the higher scale, it's kind of all of that combined in the staff turnover column. There was 44 instances of this happening, and the net result was a savings of just under $100,000. We had 4 instances of additional offsets. This related to our IDEA grant, leftover ARPA funds from last year, as well as additional offsets as relates to school choice in. All those items combined totaled an additional offset of roughly $200,000. And then the last and biggest item here is our vacancies, where we currently have 15 of them right now, and in total, the salaries combined are roughly $600,000, without a doubt the biggest area here. So in total, just from these 4 items, we're looking at nearly $1 million in salaries left over as of Q1. So here I just tried to break out what those 15 positions are. Just because I'm anal. If you count them, there's only 14. I do count this as 2 because it is 2 crossing guards listed here. But just to kind of briefly talk about it, I could not get this line to go away no matter how many times I pasted it, and same with the one up there. I apologize for it, but nonetheless, we know some of these positions aren't going to be filled at all this year, while others we're still trying to fill. So just to point 2 out, the SLP 0.7, we're still trying to fill that today. Hopefully we fill it by the end of the year. So you might see this one roll off forecasts to come. But another one, just the special ed pre-K position in the FY22 budget, 23, I'm working in too many fiscal years. The FY23 budget, we budgeted for 3 pre-K teachers. When FY23 actually came, we only needed 2. We don't think we're going to add a 3rd pre-K in the middle of the year. So this one's going to stay for most of the year. So some of these will roll off before the year's over. Some will stay, which again is why Q1 is a little inaccurate. The next area is around our health insurance. So every year, in the budget, I build in a premium rate increase for health insurance, and then the budget's approved, and about 4 months later, we actually start negotiating with the health insurance companies. So I'm trying to predict what the rate increase is going to be for 6 months down the road. This year, it was actually pretty accurate. I think last year, we had premium savings over $100,000. This year, I think I was only 0.1% off. I think the percent came in at 6.9, and I might have budgeted 7 or 7.5. I forget exactly. But nonetheless, the savings equated to roughly $17,000. The next category is around late hires and delayed enrollments. So just to briefly explain this, if a teacher is supposed to be hired on September 1, but for whatever reason we don't hire them until October 1, that 1 month is savings for us because we budgeted for health insurance for the month of September, but they weren't hired until October. In addition to that, that teacher that is hired in October has a choice when they're hired to take health insurance on October 1st or delay it for another 30 days because they might still have health insurance from the previous employer that probably pays a bigger match than we do. So they're allowed to delay it another month. So those 2 items combined represent a savings of roughly $22,000. On top of that, that vacant list of 15 positions, 8 of them are benefits eligible. For every 8 of those positions, it costs about $21,000 for their health insurance. So for every one of those positions, there also is health insurance related to them that equates to roughly $170,000. On top of that, we are seeing about $190,000 in staff turnover. So that means a staff member that left last year, the 44 instances you saw on the previous slide, about 6 or 7 of them had health insurance and their replacement didn't take it. So we budgeted health insurance for the original staff member, and the one replacing it didn't pick it up. So we're recognizing savings of almost 20 grand in each instance that occurred. So in total, just for health insurance, we're looking at about a $400,000 surplus. The next category, which I think is the last, is our transportation surplus. So again, I tried to kind of walk you through why we see the balance here. So when building the 23 budget, we look at our 22 actuals and 22 budgets. So from there, our general education transportation was roughly $840,000. We also include $30,000 for our late bus run and another $18,000 for our homeless or foster care transportation, for a total of just under $900,000. So while we were building the 23 budget, everyone knows gas prices were exploding. They went up about 200%. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had to go out to bid for our transportation contract that started in FY23. So while we were building it, we were getting word that the industry norm were looking at a 15 to 20% increase. A lot of them were suffering from a lack of bus drivers, so they were all increasing their hourly rates that they give to their employees. So we were looking at anything from a 15 to 20% increase, which for us represented about 133 grand to 170. But I will admit it, I am very conservative when it comes to estimating increases like this. I put it at 23%. So that was roughly 211 grand. When the actual contract came in, I wasn't too far off. It came in at 23.3%, but that was over the 3-year life of the contract. For the first year of the contract, they actually only hit us for a 12.4% increase. So at the same time I was accurate with the 3 years, I was inaccurate with the first year. So the net result was really about $110,000 that we're going to see an increase for the transportation. When you net those two together, it leaves about 100 grand left over for our transportation budget. So when you roll all those things up together, this is it in DAC form. Right now I'm forecasting a balance of roughly 2.1 million. This is the same chart again, just in DESI form. So what we're asking for tonight is 2 transfer requests. I'm going to explain them briefly. The first one relates to transportation. So when I built the 23 budget, just like we kind of did in the prior year with teacher negotiations, we didn't want to reveal our cards. So if you were a bus company and you were about to bid on our transportation, one thing you'd probably do is go look at our budget and see how much we put in for our increase. I didn't want to show that we put in 23%. So I put it under our benefits and fixed charges DESI category. So right now I'm just requesting that we move that money to where it's supposed to be. If you look back last year at my first quarter forecast, I did the same thing with the COLAs. We put it in the same category and we asked for it to be moved out in the first quarter. We don't necessarily have to do this. It's more of an accounting thing, just so I don't have to track it every single quarter and account for it separately. So that's just to properly classify that amount of money that we put towards the transportation increase. It will end up as a net result as the balance of roughly 100 grand in that account. I am moving the whole thing that we budgeted for. The next transfer we're requesting right now is around technology. Right now, when you look through our chart of accounts, there's only a few accounts that are negative, and that's around our devices. So about 3 years ago, or I think it was 4 now, we made a large purchase in devices, and a lot of those are failing right now, especially with the increase of all the devices we put on the system with COVID. A lot of them are failing, a lot of the monitors are going, and the Wi-Fi is iffy in some spots because we have so many devices on it. So right now, Alan has a purchase order in to replace some of the equipment that I am holding on to because his account is in the negative. This will allow him to replace that equipment and get the devices to where they need to be. And in addition to that, be ready for anything else that happens this year. This will give him roughly about $70,000 more than he technically needs today. But again, I definitely foresee more devices failing between now and the end of the year. So right now, we're only asking for 2 transfers. We do definitely anticipate that on Q2, we're going to be asking for more transfers to do something with the remaining balance. Right now, we really are discussing it with the leadership team in conjunction with building our '24 budget to try to leverage some of this to help us in the future. But right now, I don't want to ask for anything that we haven't fully vetted. So it really is just to get Alan out of the negative, because he's the only one that is at the moment. This is the motion. If you choose, just thank you, and I will take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Vinny.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, questions?
No questions.
Okay. That was very clear. We have no
So
questions.
clear.
Yep.
Thank you
you.
so
Okay.
much.
I just want, for
Yep.
transparency, I think it's important to know that we're not just watching these vacant positions sit there. We're trying to take advantage of some of that money in expanding some of our part-time positions and moving some people into full-time slots to pick up the slack, if you will. So somebody might be a .6 literacy TA. They're also picking up a .4 that's open in like the kindergarten class or something. So we're trying to take advantage of that and cover services at the same time. Many of the positions that are there are, like lunch monitors and crossing guards. They're tough to fill. Sometimes if you get somebody that stays on, it's great, but trying to find somebody after somebody leaves, it's really hard. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to look at ways to take advantage of what we have, the fundings that we have, and the FTEs that were already approved, and stay within those lanes, but try to work to get kids the services they need.
Okay, all right. I think we're ready.
I move the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approves the FY '23 operating expense budget transfers as recommended here by the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration, and is presented on the previous slide entitled Transfers Requested Q1.
Second.
Second by Anna Seizik. Vinny, can you switch to the previous slide
Yep.
so that we have it in front of us? Thank you. All right, is there any further discussion or questions?
Nope.
Okay, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? And that is unanimous of everyone present. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the motion language, Vinny.
Okay. Eric, I think we are back to you
Yeah.
under the superintendent report, and there is an exhibit there.
Hopefully, people had the opportunity to read this. So this links back to the conversation we just had about out-of-district placements. In the state of Massachusetts, the Operational Services Division sets the rates for state-run out-of-district placement facilities. This year, we kind of got a shock where they sent an email out to all the superintendents and said, hey, by the way, it's going to be 14% this year. So part of that really is going to impact our conversation about budgets for next year. I just wanted to put it on the table now. This 14%, if it stays at 14%, will cost us about $350,000 increase in the budget, just automatic, like there you go, here it is. And we really don't have a lot of control over that. It's just really what we have to pay. So it was topic discussion last week. I was in Beverly with several other superintendents of regional schools trying to figure out a way to attack this. So we reached out to state reps and state senators and each of our districts and tried to at least get their ear on it. I'm supposed to have a call scheduled with Bruce Tarr in the next week to be able to help him to understand it. We've sent him emails. We've sent all the local reps and senators to see if we can get some help. Usually, the increases are 1.5%, 1.8%, sometimes 2%. This suddenly came out of the blue and was a curveball for every superintendent. And for some districts, bigger districts, it's over $1 million, $1.5 million in some of these bigger districts. For us, it's about the round number is, I think, $336,311, but it just depends on where everything falls. Because even though they say 14%, it may not go that high in every single place. It's really, they're trying to deal with the same things we are. Hiring, increased costs. So I think we understand why, but the reality was everybody was shocked by it. All the superintendents kind of put their hands up and said, no way. So there is some activity happening, and I just wanted you to be aware as we enter the budget season that this is one of several things that we need to just consider as we go through the budgeting process. And I'm going to continue to work with the group that I'm involved in and through the Superintendent's Roundtable to really push to see if we can get some action on reducing this number.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, oh, Anna.
Thank you. So, Eric, this is so surprising, and this is restricted to state-run facilities. So, I'm assuming the talking point to the legislators, because the state is also projecting massive surpluses on their budget. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me why the state wouldn't just help cover this. Like, they have the money also. Do you know politically why the state is pushing this back to the local level? I mean, I feel like there's a missing part of this increase.
I think operational, go ahead.
That was not, is it state? I thought it was private schools. No?
It basically
I'm sorry.
is
Yeah, it's okay.
is linked to state-run schools, but what happens is the private schools follow suit based on what the state's doing. So it impacts every single area, except for out of states. Like we have some kids out of state. So
I'm sorry, I know I stepped on the rest
No,
of
it's
the
okay.
answer to that
It's
question.
okay.
Well, I was just going to clarify, is Landmark raising their rates a comparable amount?
we don't know yet. This was just the first volley out there that the Office of Services Division said, get ready for this, it's coming. So we honestly don't know, and it could end up that they're all at 10% by the time things happen, but this was really a shock. Some of the superintendent emails were of shock to say, how am I gonna come up with, and like I said, the bigger districts have to come up with $750,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million out of their budget, so that's a big bite. For us, it's a big bite too.
Is part of the budget strategy for us, now I see why we're pulling back a little bit on the scale down of the prepaid tuitions, because that the proposed drawdown would have not reflected it, but we might actually need that money in order to cover these costs. So when do we expect this to be resolved or have a final answer?
We will probably complete the budget process before we have final numbers from some places.
Okay.
Which tends to be what happens with everything. Like the bus contract happens after we figure out the thing. The insurance happens after we figure out the budget. These things will come too in waves. The private schools will be last. The state schools will do it
Given
all
how upset and worried the superintendents and sort of the school leadership would a letter from us as a school committee be helpful? I feel like that would just be another piece of
together. Yeah, sure. I think it makes sense. I mean, I can send everybody the letters that
there's a template and
we
whatnot.
designed and sent. One letter from all the superintendents that we just swapped out our numbers with it.
Okay.
They're aware. They're very much aware. But I
Do you
think
think it would actually make a difference, though?
I think it's important to get their ear to be able to say, hey, this is unusual. We're in a tough time, and now all of a sudden, surprise.
We're trying to build a school. We're trying to build fields. We're trying.
It's about a point. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's almost a percent. It's like 0.72% of our
it's a lot.
budget. That if you're trying to control costs, that you just lost control of something that you may need for students or for teachers.
Well, and to sort of piggyback on a point you made during Vinny's presentation, I think it's important for the public to understand that some of these out-of-district placements they really come at you, and one student can add significant cost, and no amount of programming that we offer will help every student. There are always going to be certain students that require very expensive out-of-district placement, and it's not a deficiency on our part. It's just some kids need that help, and you never know when it's going to happen, and you don't know where they're going to need to go. And I wish the public sort of could understand sometimes that there's nothing about district deficiency that that will help this. You know, there's always going to be a handful of kids that require, you know, like you said, there was a placement that was $250,000 for one student. You know, those students exist and they're always here, and we need to take care of them. And under federal law, we do not have a choice. It's like you can't, to your point, we can't say no. So I hope the public understands just how serious this is, because this could be a huge deal for our budget.
And one thing we're trying to avoid from the superintendent's perspective is creating a regular ed, special ed battle here. The reality is these are our kids. They have needs that are different from other kids, and you know, my opinion is we need to be able to meet that need for those kids in our community. So it's unfortunate, and it may change. We're going to push as hard as we can with lobbying from all sides right now. So we'll continue to do that, and I know MASS is involved heavily.
In the workforce stabilization factor, they're saying it's basically, there's a fiscal program that's ending and they want to carry it forward. So these private schools aren't hitting that cliff. Is there an equivalent public school set of grants that we could apply for to potentially offset some of this 14% increase?
Not necessarily in the workforce side. I mean, the offset of some of the special ed costs, some of them come from grants for us.
Right, but
know,
I
like,
was, if there was something similar to a workforce grant for the public schools.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it if there is, but part of this for all of us in the superintendency right now is trying to figure out, okay, how do we get around this, or how do we meet this need?
Yeah.
If it does come to full fruition. So it's definitely part of the conversation. So I just want people to be aware. I don't want to create a furor yet. I think it's just be aware as we move into the budgeting process. You may see this big number and say, well, what's that for? It'll be related to this initially. And as we work through it at the state level, we'll hopefully get some action and activity.
Okay.
I got one more.
Yep, thank you.
Is there any move to lobby the state, not just on our part, to have the state pick up the whole tab for special ed rather than this circuit breaker, complicated recirculation?
It's a difficult question, only because again, the small group I'm involved in, the regional superintendents group, so all the regionals around here, we meet to discuss those things. Like, we're supposed to get X number of dollars reimbursement for transportation, special ed transportation. We don't see it. We're supposed to get certain amounts of money back for Medicare, and you know, it costs you're basically paying an employee to come up with your $80,000 in Medicare, so there's no gain there either. So we're continuing to have those conversations to try to get the state to fund more, because that's basically what it comes down to. These unfunded mandates continue to come at schools, and it's draining, you know, and it's creating that tension between regular ed and special ed that really shouldn't be there. It's all of us, you know, we're all together in this, and I think it's one of the hot topics for us to try to figure out how to work with people at the state level, both at the commissioner's office and at the State House, to say, you know, hey, some of these things are not working out. Like, you know, they made promises on some things that we're going to change in certain budgets, and they have yet to come to fruition, but we'll just continue to keep lobbying them and working towards them. And I know MASC, MASS, MSAA, they're all also pushing hard on some of these issues, because it's ultimately it ends up impacting our kids.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I got one more thing.
I thought you were going to say that. Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
I just got something else on the report.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's no
No,
other questions.
I anticipated something that didn't happen.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. Totally new topic, MSBA again. We received our response for our SOI for the roof for the high school, and we did not get accepted again. Now it's up to 30 years. It's moving away from us slowly. But the new reality is, yesterday I received a letter from the MSBA saying they froze the that core program, for those emergency funds. So they're not even funding them because the number of projects that are way, way over budget due to the economy is making them look differently. So they froze that program, even though we didn't get accepted. But if we got accepted, we would
Yeah.
we would probably have a problem.
We would have
So-
been frozen.
Yeah, so that program is frozen. We'll wait and keep an eye on it and see if it opens up again, we'll reapply. We'll just continue, it's just an automatic thing. When we get the email that the window's open, we'll just drop it back in. So right now, they moved up to 30 years. I think we're at 28 now, 27, something. We're creeping up on it. So at some point, the stars will align on that.
Or the roof will collapse and we will have to
Yes,
just fix
that
it.
would be a whole separate problem. So just wanted you to be aware of that. We did get notification that, but again, we'll apply again in the spring. We'll continue to do that.
What level of subsidy were you anticipating for, what's the roof gonna cost? How much would have come from that?
So don't hold me to this number because it changes constantly, but we keep hearing between $4 and $5 million to do the high school roof. By the time you get to that point, it could be higher or lower, I don't know, but in that realm, they'll determine a reimbursement cost, just like they did for the Cutler School. It may not be 47%. I think, like Dave Polito said earlier, we were all guessing in the mid to high 30s for that project. So it just depends on what they have for money, and then how many projects they're funding. That will determine the reimbursement on it. And it's a little bit easier for reimbursement on a project of that size because it's so specific to the roof. It's not, you're not worrying about all these other components that are involved, like a full building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
And then one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would certainly just want to extend congratulations to all of our athletic teams that made it into the tournament. Every single team is in, and they're starting. In fact, as volleyball is tonight. I don't know how they're going. I'm still waiting to get the text, but it's fun for the kids. I think it's a great way for kids to connect and be together and support one another. So it's a big deal that every single fall team made it into the tournament. So congratulations to our coaches and student athletes and athletic department.
Absolutely. Lots of hard work. Successful fall season. Okay. All right. Looks like we're on to committee reports. Capital Finance.
We have not met since our last general meeting.
Okay. All right. Policy.
Well, policy is smoking hot right now. We met on Monday and we finished up the F section and we had a discussion about where we were, and we will be bringing forth the H, I, and J sections in their completeness up for first reading at the meeting in November 17th. At the next meeting, we're going to finish up the last two policies from D, then we're going to start with K and L. Those are all relatively short sections. Policy thinks that we'll have our review of those done by the next meeting or two, which means, don't hold me to it, that we could have the entirety of the MASC policy review presented to the full committee and fully adopted by, say, January of next year, which would mean policy subcommittee review, like the whole thing, which is years in the making. And I would feel like it would be remiss not to credit Michelle Bailey, Michelle Horgan, Peter Wolstick, David Polito. This has been a years, so policy is cruising. We are meeting again on the 21st. I will say that at the last meeting, we had a representative from the Athletic Facilities Improvement Project as well. There was some desire to make sure that our fiscal policies were going to be in alignment with any proposed contracts. And so we've had a representative there. Tim Fazio or another representative will also be there on the 21st. And we're in close contact through the superintendent to district council to make sure that the contract is in alignment with the policy. So honestly, I give policy subcommittee like 10 out of 10, wouldn't recommend right now. We are crushing it.
Awesome. Thank you. And look forward to that first reading of all.
Oh,
of
they're
those.
riveting. They are
Yes.
riveting.
Excellent. And I did make note of that as a topic for future meetings, so Eric and I will discuss putting that on the 17th. Okay. Negotiations, we have not met.
Slackers.
No. Exactly, because we're slackers.
Covered that earlier in the meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yes, that was,
I missed that. What was that?
Oh, you covered it earlier
Oh,
in the meeting.
okay.
talked earlier about.
Okay, so my chair's report, I do have several different things. Before we get to the exhibit, I just want to, we did cover it early in the meeting, but I just want to say I'm really excited that we have an approved contract for our superintendent. I feel like we are we've already started an exciting journey, and we're really excited to have you in this place for the long run.
Thank you.
Very happy. All right, and I do have some other details, things. You'll notice that we have the meeting schedule. We have discussed this once. This is, yeah, if you check it out, this is,
Oop, too big.
too big. It's been,
There we go.
this has been edited. We did discuss this. I think I actually think we probably need to vote on this.
Okay.
Because this is something we voted on initially at the beginning, and, these, and this is a little bit adjusted. So if you look there, there's a couple of things. So, okay, so I'm going to start with this, and then I have a question. Okay, so the Wednesday, February 15th, if needed, Vinny sort of has explained to us that we're going to have a meeting on February 9th, and that if that meeting does not end with a approved budget on the 9th, we're going to have the budget hearing on that night and then the budget vote, then we would need to have the next, and notice that it is a Wednesday, February 15th, if needed, and that is correct, the last day.
The last day possible, we could do it.
By putting this out here, what I'm sort of putting forth to the committee is that it is fully hoped and anticipated that we would not be meeting on Wednesday, February 15th. However, if we are, it's really important. So this is why we're bringing this now, so that you guys can, we can vote on that, and also so that you can put it on your calendars.
This is different than what we have.
Yeah, it's
I won't be able to make Wednesday. I teach Wednesday nights.
Okay.
But that would only be if needed.
It's if needed, but
If we can't get
but
to a final
again, like, we would not want to get into, we would not want to get into a situation where on Wednesday, February 15th, we aren't able to create a quorum to,
Well, but does the budget vote require a 2/3 majority of the full committee? Could we actually, this is worst case scenario, could we actually do it if any one of us wasn't here?
I'm sorry, what?
we certainly could do it if one person was not, I mean, what is,
Yeah, you need
I'm just
five.
thinking,
You need 5.
yeah.
yeah, we'd need 5, but I'm pretty sure that having just looked at the financial policies, which might well be in effect by that moment, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some discussion about a majority of the full committee for the budget adoption. We looked at this on Monday. Remember we talked about full committee versus,
We'd need 5 in the room, and you'd need all to vote in
Right,
favor of 4.
right.
If only 4 in the room voted, and there were 5
so
in
the,
the
qu-
room.
the supermajority of the totality of the full committee numerically, even if only 6 people were here. That's my point. It has to be 5.
5.
It has to be 5, even if there's only 6 people here or only 5 people here. Okay, I just want to make sure that was.
Correct. Right, no, thank you for that, because that's a separate issue. What I was really talking about, being able to ensure that we can hold a meeting.
Right.
Yes.
So anyway.
Well, so my point is that
yeah.
typically we could hold a meeting with only 4, but
you're saying
because
we
of
would need
this,
5.
it has to be
Great,
5
that's an
because it's a
excellent-
budget
yes,
thing.
that's
That's
an
the point I was
excellent
not
Um,
making well.
So,
I'm going to help you with the other one.
yeah,
So
Well-
here's the other thing too, where it's an if needed. That would be a one agenda item meeting.
correct.
Right.
So if it was like, I am stuck someplace until 7:30, you could have an 8 o'clock meeting, you can have
Right.
it just needs to be before
And we could have,
midnight
and
on
we
the
could have,
15th.
and we could have virtual
You could have an
participation.
11:50 meeting if you needed to get.
Right, it is just one item.
Yep.
Right,
Yeah.
and it could be virtual. that we could have
Yeah.
virtual,
Okay.
Yeah, I was
Members.
gonna say, I can give my class a break in Boston and zoom in.
right? I actually do not remember the topic, but we did have a meeting.
It was about the posting of the election. We had a 4-minute meeting
Yes,
with, I think,
exactly.
4 of us
Right,
present.
exactly.
I remember that
Right,
meeting.
on Zoom.
I remember that
Yes,
meeting.
exactly.
I
Um,
miss you.
So, but anyway, okay, so,
The other one was already on there. It was because there was a month between the 16th meeting and the 13th meeting. So we just put that as an if needed originally to say, just in case.
Long.
right,
Because a
That
month
was
is a
already
long
there.
span of time to be without you guys, but it's also,
Why don't we
in
move
case
up
we need,
April?
in
Is
case
it
something
'cause of
comes
April
up
vacation?
as we approach
Yeah.
town meeting, et cetera. Because, if there's something that we need to
Oh, it's 'cause of
develop for town
April
meeting,
vacation.
we may need that.
so,
can't move
that
it
was,
up.
so, okay, and then I actually had one more question, is that and this is just, I had also initially thought we had penciled in, because if you look, we have 2 meetings in a row in February, the 2nd and the 9th.
Mhm.
And then normally we would meet not 2 in a row. We would normally meet the 2nd and the 16th.
Right.
So.
But I think that was moved because of all
we
the
mo-
budget stuff.
No, we did. That is why we moved
When
it.
is
But I just
February
want to make
vacation?
sure there's no circumstances under which we would need the 16th because we're meeting, if
Correct.
needed, we would meet on the 15th. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Any other questions about this? Okay. All right. Can we have a motion?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the 2022-2023 school committee meeting schedule as posted on the agenda.
Second.
Second by Jan Carr. All right, is there further discussion? All right, all those in favor? And that is unanimous, and the motion passes. Thank you for that. All right, so I actually have a few more things here on my chair's report. I want to just quickly update you on the MASC conference. I will get my act together and send you a little email, though not as long as last year, because I was only there half the time this year. I only went for a day and a half. I just wanted to read to you the names of the sessions that I attended, so you can get a flavor for some of the things that occurred. So I went to Addressing the Unique Challenges of Regional School Committees, MCIEA, Tools for Increasing Educational Equity. I went to the MASC Delegate Assembly. I voted as instructed, and all of the resolutions passed. I will send you, some had some minor amendments. And it took a lot longer than you could imagine.
Oh, no, I'm sure it would.
I also attended Understanding the Student Mental Health Crisis, Causes, Impacts, and Solutions. And then the one that I already mentioned, Creating and Promoting Equitable Conditions in the Schools, which was presented by our neighbor, the Beverly Schools. I did ask since we're on the calendar, I did ask when the next year's MASC meeting is, and I'm going to say it, and I encourage you all to just pencil it in, because it's a great conference, and I learned a ton, so you might want to consider going. So next year, it is November 8th through the 11th, which is a Wednesday through a Saturday, November 8th through the 11th. And I encourage everyone to go if you could.
At some point in time, can somebody bring up with the MASC that definitely discriminates against people who work 5 days a week?
Yeah, so it's.
Second.
So,
There's no way I can
Yeah.
go, ever.
Second.
no, and it's actually, because the conference really was focused on equity, it was one of the conversations that we had, not in a session, but just at a table that I was sitting at. We talked about the equity issues around scheduling and a whole number of things, and that came up. There is, of course, no actual time that would be equitable to everyone.
No, but if they alternated it.
No, right,
like-
no. Yeah. So anyway, so yes, that is something that other people you're not alone in
Do they change the location every year, or is it always
I,
in
you
South
know,
Shore?
my vast experience is 2 years long. I've been in the same
More than
location
mine.
both times.
Okay.
I do not know whether.
No, it's always been there, as far as I know.
So, right, and that is an equity issue as well. In other words, some people were driving from
Worcester or
Western
something.
Massachusetts. I got the joy of driving through Boston on Wednesday morning, which is super fun too, so, yeah. Anyway, so that's that. I was there for a day and a half. Dorothy does present our, several different things. I'm pleased to say I did not need to go to her session that was there on Thursday because it was on how to find a new superintendent.
No wonder she presented. She's helped us a lot with that.
I was so excited to say, I don't have to go to that one. So, okay. I did send out to the committee, this is just all dates, I did send out to the committee in an email just the tentative dates for the superintendent evaluation dates, just for you to look at, and as we, just share with me if you have any thoughts or concerns, and obviously those are tentative dates, but they'll come up as they, but if anyone had any questions about that or whatever, you could just let me know. Amy has as our secretary, has a quick housekeeping
Yes.
information.
At our October 20th meeting, Anna pointed out an error in the minutes from September 22nd around what the meeting date of our last policy subcommittee meeting was. We asked Mihaela to change the date listed, and as she was updating, found another instance of the incorrect date and another instance of mentioning a date that wasn't mentioned, just it was referencing another meeting. So I advised her to make the changes and just say that I would inform the committee that she made these minor changes. The end.
Thank you. And, this, while these things might seem small, I think it's really important to do what to be transparent and to share, and so that there was a Scrivener's error, but it didn't get discussed in the meeting, so it's important.
What's important if we're looking something up later,
Exactly.
then we all.
That-
You'll know what happened. Yep.
I wanted to, I believe I forwarded this to everyone, but I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that Hamilton put out to all boards and committees that there is a Gordon Conwell meeting for strategic planning regarding that property on Monday, November 14th at 7 p.m. at the Community House. I did ask, but I didn't yet get a response, and it's possible that they did respond. Today was a busy day. But I did ask whether or not they put it out to all boards and committees. We're the only one that has Wenham residents, so I don't know whether really only our Hamilton people are allowed to go to that or not. I'm not sure. But I did want to make you aware of that, and if I do get an answer, I'll send that out to you.
Okay.
But certainly, Hamilton people certainly have been.
We have strategic planning that night, right, Eric? The 14th?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that is all I have. That's more than I usually have. All right, and I am on to topics for future meetings. No? Amy? No?
Nope.
Okay. Vinny?
You have the 24 budget for next week and the audit.
The audit, yes, we got the audit moved.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, they're both
Yep.
on the next meeting.
Yes, yes, thank you. Okay, unless anyone has anything else, I would be open to taking a motion.
I move we adjourn at 8:54 p.m.
Second.
Second by Amy Kunberger, and anybody, all those in favor? It's unanimous, we are adjourned.